So tell me, after our last episode, it sounded, and I don't know if I have this right, so you can correct me
Mhm.
if not. Um, were you saying essentially that the new agey spiritual stuff, teachings and stuff, did not protect you from grief, maybe in the way that people said that they would or portray them as? Or is that not exactly?
Yeah, I think that I'm glad I had the experiences with it, and I think it did help me cope with a lot of things that were sort of, I mean, there's all the different kinds of grief, like losing a job, losing a
Totally.
relationship, all that, those types of things. Um, but and I really did use the teachings to like help me through those. But uh when it came to like the big kahuna, just the like garbage shoot for years, it, you know, like you can't meditate through that. There's no amount of mind setting you can do. There's no amount of, you know, oh, everything has a beginning and a middle and an end. Like if you're being honest with yourself when you're doing those new age practices, you're like, oh, yes, everything has a beginning, middle, and end. But if my parent died, if my partner died, would that really be good enough
Who
to get
says
you
that
through that?
everything has a beginning and middle and an end? Is that
I
like
mean,
a
it's sort of like a yogic teaching, like, oh, the breath is like a
ah
wave, beginning, middle, end. We're so good at beginnings, but endings are harder. It's like,
yeah.
well, yeah, but you might be able to apply that. Okay, so other people might be able to apply that expertly. For me, it it there was no way it was going to help me tackle the death of my mom and the cancer diagnosis of my mom. There was just maybe I lost it and other people are able to do that. But another thing that I think happens is that I don't know if you found this, but a lot of the like teachers, leaders, um, they will share their story of grief, like losing someone, almost like a badge of honor. And then they're like, look how well adjusted I am, and you think, like, oh, I could be well adjusted after that. I could go on and turn my pain into power, and I could go on and do that. But that is not how it goes. And I would guess it's not how it goes for a lot of people. And I don't know if that's really how they feel or if they're just trying to, if it helps them with their pain to say that kind of thing, or maybe it's real. But for me, it was it's still an excruciating journey. And I don't think I'm ever going to be like, yes, I became a stronger, more powerful person. I didn't need to be a more powerful person. I loved my life. I was already a strong person. I didn't need to lose my mom to find that out, and another thing I feel like, I don't know, is is another thing they tout is like, oh, you can do this within yourself, the self work. And that's just not how life is. Like, oh, you do this independently, the self work. It's like there are people around you. The One of the things that helps you to heal and gives you life is people who need you and people you need. It's like we're the people around you exist. It's not a solo journey. Like, and nothing in life is a solo journey. And so I also think that that's obviously there's like, you can't be codependent. That's a thing.
Yep.
But, my sisters are still some of the closest, have always been the closest people to me. And even more now, like they need me. I step up to the plate for them. They step up to the plate for me. And that's a very healing thing,
Mhm.
which does not really come up in those new age practices. Like, want people to know you do not have to go at it alone.
Yeah.
Like, you do not have to be alone. And although some people, when you share your story, they get a little nervous and they share a story of their own and it makes you feel a little invalidated, you can still see that people care and they really don't want you to be in pain. And that's sometimes feels good as like camaraderie, sometimes feels like, oh, okay, well, you're just kind of story topping me, but that's fine. But you can get strength and healing from the people around you. Doesn't have to
I think
be
it depends
alone.
on how someone shares that, right? Because it's like
Hmm.
when somebody just jumps in, you can tell sometimes if there's someone who has not, it's like they're waiting for the moment where they can talk about their pain because they've never processed it. And
Hmm.
so you can feel that when you're like sharing something,
Hmm.
some deep grief of your own, and then
Hmm.
someone jumps in to be like, mine is this. And they like want to
Yeah.
dump it. Like that's different, I think, than someone, I think you can share in a way that is a like an addition to the conversation.
Yes. And I think it's also kind of the, if somebody had been through a grief like very recently, I would
Mm-hmm.
hesitate to really say much at all because um, there's about a million things that you can say that make it worse, and
Yeah.
very few things that you could say to make it better, or nothing. So once, it's a little less acute, that's when, you can approach it sort of softly. But not, I'm still not good at that with other people. And it's interesting because I feel like we're really influenced by what we see of people around us in movies and stuff. Because when I was a teenager, my friend in high school, her dad died very unexpectedly. And I don't know what, I guess I just didn't let the discomfort get to me, even though I was deeply uncomfortable being around her. I would literally, I forced the friendship because I was like, she needs me. She doesn't know she needs me right now. She's pushing everybody away. But I would just sit with her quiet, and she would talk and talk, and I didn't know what to say. But back then, I guess I just innately knew, like, I just need to be sitting
Present.
here with her.
Yeah.
Yes. And that, I feel like, we feel like we have to like add more and add more as we get older because we feel like, oh, I need to have the right thing to say. But back then, when I didn't know much about grief, it was like I just had the instinct to just sit, and I have to try to remember that when someone is sharing with me now. Hmm.
Are you, and you do not have to say yes to this, but are you willing to share a bit about the story of losing your mom? Like
Yeah.
her diagnosis and kind of that journey. I'm especially
Yeah.
curious for you emotionally what that whole thing was like because there's so many like
Yeah. So, my mom was never like a complainer at all. She would never, she was a nurse. She was just an amazing person. Um, she never complained. She was always like caring for others. And she had been having some symptoms and she kind of ignored them, like a lot of people who are very nurturing do. And she kind of didn't follow up with them, which is, uh, you can't know how things would have turned out, but kind of didn't really follow up with them. And then, oh, I'm so sorry. My sister is like FaceTiming.
that's okay.
Jeez.
It actually
Um,
I can't tell. Yeah,
oh,
you're
okay.
good.
Um, so, she was having so many problems. She went to the doctor. She had bladder cancer, and um, they diagnosed her with stage 3, which means it's through the walls of the tissue, and metastasizing. So it's not isolated to one organ. Because if it's isolated to one organ, it's actually pretty fairly easy to treat. You just kind of almost insert like chemotherapy drugs into the space. Um, but once it's gone through the tissue wall of the bladder or whatever organ it's affected, it's in the bloodstream and you don't know where it's going. So, I mean, when she got the diagnosis, me having a medical background, I just knew she wasn't going to have very long. And that was
Yeah.
really where the grief began, is that moment. And after that, I don't have experience with with other kinds of illnesses in family, but cancer, it steals everything from you. You can't you can't enjoy Christmas. You're at a 4 out of 10 at all times. You can't and maybe it's me being negative or something, but for me it was like you can't it steals everything from you. It steals every moment. There's no area of your life that isn't tainted and touched by it, even when she's still alive. And for my mom, I never tried to put a positive spin on things. Like what the fuck? Don't do that, you know? And I always try to just be myself because I heard someone say, like, when someone's dying, that's not the time to become someone else, you
Yeah.
know? That's just not right. But having that medical background, like, I knew in my gut, I was like, this isn't going to be long. And it did turn out to be quite aggressive. She was refractory to any chemotherapy or radiation, and um, very, very hard chemotherapy on very hard on her. The chemotherapy it was not easy. Very, very destructive in her body and lots of pain. It metastasized to her bones, and bone cancer is supposedly one of the most painful things you can possibly have. So the thing that was so hard was that she was so active in life, and she was in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
She was wheelchair bound for
When she
most
started
of
chemo or before?
before because the cancer had gone to her bones, and so it was too weak. And I mean, being wheelchair bound is it's awful for someone who's so active. It's just it's just terrible. And she is always, there are moments where she was just like, I just want to rock my grandson. It's not the same when you're in a wheelchair. And when my nephew was born, it was literally the light and the darkness. I'm so glad my sister had my nephew. It was the most wonderful thing that could have ever happened. Um, at that time. And I don't want to say much about it, but it was not like a thing that we knew was going to happen, that anybody knew it was going to happen. So, um, but there was, just being in a wheelchair, I think she was just felt humiliated. And I mean, that's just, I would have given anything to, take an ounce of her pain away to let her be able to walk again. She was in my wedding. Oh my gosh, my brother-in-laws both pushed her down the aisle, which was just the most, I mean, like, it was amazing. She was so strong during my wedding. Like, she stayed the whole time, even though I knew she was in pain and she was not the most comfortable. Um, but so I try to look back on that time with like feeling very special and feeling very lucky that she did that. But in general, it's like, it's nothing is ever normal again. Nothing is
Totally.
normal again. You can't call up your mom and be like, "Oh man, my best friend in high school's brother had a baby," or something. Like the things you talk about your mom with, like shit like that. It's not possible to go back to that place that's just like your mom is your mom. Maybe other people can achieve that, and if it's a different dynamic, but there was no way. And I know she's really proud of me, but it it's just so painful from the moment of diagnosis because you're just like, it's like this I mean, maybe it's a negative, but it's like it's the beginning of the end. And knowing what cancer is like and what metastatic cancer is like, it's not, I knew it wasn't, I knew she wasn't going to be the person who lives 5 years. I knew she
Yeah.
wasn't. And the
How
United
long did
States
you
is
have with her from when she was diagnosed until she died?
14 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, it was very hard. She was only not lucid for about the last week and a half of her life, and I
Mm-hmm.
was able to be there. because I was in Pennsylvania at the time. She's in Seattle, but um, there's some things where I feel lucky. I mean, again, I just feel so happy that she got to have such a bond with my nephew when he was a baby. That's something I'm really grateful for. But yeah, it's funny another way people react, which I think is a self-protection mechanism, is that they assume she was maybe this very unhealthy person during life or she did something. You have to do that in your head, like, oh, I don't drive unsafely. I wouldn't be in an accident. Or
That wouldn't happen to me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it wouldn't happen to me. And I don't blame people, but one of the huge risk factors for bladder cancer is smoking. So almost every doctor, when I tell them I have a history, they'll be like, oh, was she a smoker? She never smoked. She never overdrank. She was so healthy. I mean, it's truly one of those things where she did nothing to deserve that. And I'm not saying anybody deserves it, but I'm saying there's certain lifestyle factors that people can change and don't, namely smoking. Honestly, there's no question in your mind that this is going to catch up with the smoking is going to catch up with you, and people do it. And it's like, well, that's a choice they're making. But my mom, she never did anything. The only thing we can possibly think of is when she was a nurse, they used to have much less, um, the safety around medications was a lot less. So she was a nurse in 1968, 1970. So, they used to openly mix chemotherapy drugs and really caustic drugs. And maybe, they do that in hazmat suits now. So
Right.
maybe there was something like that, but it's obviously not something she knew about or chose. And so, I
I
let
feel
people
like
have their thoughts about it, but
I
she
just feel
didn't do
like there's
anything. And it's
so,
a very painful, very, very painful death as well. So that's another thing that feels very unfair.
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like there's just very rarely any one cause of something like that, and to try to pin it on like one particular thing or like I just feel that there's so many factors, some that are in our control and some that are outside of our control when it comes to disease or illness. Like it's just like you can never really
Yeah.
pin why this happened.
Well, I mean,
No,
medically you can with cancer. Things like,
sometime.
well, your cells are multiplying at an extremely fast rate all day long, and they have DNA sets in them that are being copied over and over again. And the more that your cells have to reproduce because they're inflamed, the more chance you have for a cell mutation that's malignant. So if you
Mm-hmm.
smoke and you damage the inside of your lungs over and over, your cells are having to regenerate extremely way more than other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just a much higher chance for a malignant cell to come up and cause cancer.
Totally. But
But
there are
the
some people who smoke their whole lives and don't get cancer,
few,
right?
yeah, yeah, or that aren't affected whatsoever is not as common. They might end up with the emphysema or COPD or something like that, which is very difficult as well. But um, yeah, and then there's people like my mom who did nothing that we know of, you know. So that's true. You don't know why did her body do that? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
People did that a lot with my brother's accident as well, where it was like, well, he must have been drinking. He must have been on drugs. He
oh
must have
my
been
gosh.
like, he must have been driving recklessly. It must have been his fault somehow. And not that like it would make it any better or not if it like some people die or they get very injured and it is their fault in the sense that they they crashed or they whatever, and I'm not saying that that even makes it make sense
Mhm.
or um is a better reason, but like in my brother's case it wasn't any of those things. It was that he had the unfortunate um luck or what have you of being in a car that allegedly should have been recalled and was not. So, so the car malfunction. So that's like the kind of thing, it's like that could happen to anyone, but people do, and
Yeah.
I think it's natural. And I still find myself, anytime an accident happens or something happens, I'm like, what happened? I want to know what happened so I know that like
Yeah.
it won't
Yeah.
happen to me. And I think we all want to do that,
People
but it is
always act like getting in a
unhelpful.
car isn't by far the most dangerous thing we do in life.
Yeah.
I tell people I'm such a backseat driver. I'm such a nervous passenger because I'm just like, it is by far the most dangerous thing. There is no reason to make it even more dangerous by speeding or driving. I'm not even gonna get to it because
Yeah.
I'm the
I
most
can be
annoying
that way
person
too.
when it comes to driving. Like following too close, I just can't tolerate people because I'm like, why? Why would you do that? You're just making it.
I do tend to follow a little too close. Jordan calls out a lot.
Oh,
I'm like, I
really?
don't know I'm doing it. I'm just a little
Yeah.
impatient. But I am a very nervous passenger, I
Mm.
will say. Since my brother's accident is I'm extremely like picky. Uh and a thing I really don't like is making unnecessarily, like we have a lot of those double lines here where you can
Oh,
pass on
yeah.
the other side of the road.
Hmm.
Sometimes Jordan and I saw a guy
Oh,
just the other day who made the choice to pass two cars in front of him on a blind corner. And he
oh
like
my God.
just missed. I was like, we're gonna see a crash. And
Yeah.
he like
Yeah.
just missed. I was like,
Hmm.
whoa, that's a decision. I can't even.
Yeah.
It always makes me want to follow that person and like talk to
Be
them when
like,
they get out
who
and
are you?
just like, yeah, like who, why?
Yeah.
Like
Why
not even to get mad
unnecessary?
at them, but just to just understand, like, do you not care about like
Yeah.
what is your mindset like
Yeah.
that decision gets made is what I want to understand.
Like, if you have a sick, injured, dying in labor person in your car, call an ambulance because they can get through traffic fast. Don't try to do that. Like, don't try to just. It's so. And last dad moment, the speed limit is for ideal conditions. Okay? It's for I'm just saying I've seen so many car accidents. Not I've gone to so many car accidents rather. And so I always tell people I've seen enough skulls smeared on the pavement to know that you should not be speeding in the pouring rain and things like that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I know that doesn't land for most people. Most people don't listen. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
I
one
think
paramedic's opinion.
it's like a self-protection thing, right? You just don't
Mm-hmm.
want to even
Mm-hmm.
consider that could be the case. I'll
Mm-hmm.
just tell you this. One of the uh you'll hate this. One of the GNM, the German New Medicine people,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that woman actually who wrote, like, was angry about my post or something. I have no idea who she is, but she found it somehow. But she apparently, somebody told me, doesn't, is like against seatbelts. So she has like 7 kids or something, and they all don't wear seatbelts. She like never has anyone in her car wear seatbelts because to wear seatbelts is safetyism, and it's like
So you want your child to become a projectile if you
that's
get.
well, because worrying
What
about
about
it.
like car seats? That's illegal. I don't know about Canada, but it's
Well, they were
illegal.
living they were living for a while in Nicaragua, where I guess
Oh no,
it
there's no
didn't matter.
rules.
So
No.
now I believe she's moved back to the US or in splitting her time somewhere. So I don't know what she'll do now. That was my first
Throw the
question when
baby
I
in your
found out
backpack and just
she
that's
was
what they do.
moving, was what's she gonna do when it's legal, when it's illegal to. But yeah, that was also a thing where it's like a furtheration of that viewpoint of, when some like ultra religious communities or whatever are like against doctors, hospitals in any circumstance.
Hmm.
Have
Hmm.
you ever attended things like that? Because did you read Educated, the memoir?
I did not.
So
No.
her family was like I don't know what group they belonged to, but they were like that. And basically, like, there were times where the dad almost like burned alive and they still didn't take him to the hospital. Like, he was covered in burns and they
Yes.
wouldn't
Oh
go, or
God.
they all got in a car crash and there were like broken bones and all this stuff and they just didn't go.
My only experiences with Amish and Mennonite, and really the only times they call is for traumatic injuries like amputated limbs.
Yeah.
They're not, it's not like they don't care. They have a community and they have people who, act as the, nurse or midwife. A lot of times they have childbirth things that go wrong and they don't call for a long time because sometimes they have like a midwife who's been trained, and sometimes it's just like, well, my mom helped with births and her mom helped with births and she taught me. And, people have been giving birth a long time. Sometimes that works. I think, you know, we maybe don't need a doctor in every birth, but when things go wrong and then you have the paramedics come out and you're already starting behind, you're already starting from a place of emergency.
Yeah.
Um, then it's not good. And and that's like I said, my only experiences with Amish and Mennonite communities
But it sounds like they
from
do
Pennsylvania.
call ever. Like at
Eventually,
some
yeah. Oh yeah,
point.
traumatic uh things, they also have congenital problems like the kids have congenital problems because there might be, I don't want to be like stereotypical, but there might be a little bit of family inbreeding type of thing,
Yeah.
incest.
Uh-huh.
I don't think inbreeding is the right word, incestual, just because it's a small community. But when you get that, you get heart conditions in kids, you get seizure disorders in kids, you get cerebral palsy, you get things like that. And when they come to a facility, usually they'll go to an Amish or Mennonite facility or somewhere that has a um, agreement to treat them because they only pay in cash. Um, they they bring their kid who's having seizures in like a horse and buggy, and I'm always like, how the hell does that work? Like, this person should have an ergonomic wheelchair. This person should have things that make their quality of life better, like adaptive tools, occupational therapy, things like
Yeah.
that, and they don't do that. They just kind of like lay them down. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's my only experience with that, but I'm sure there are a lot. And you just hope that there are trained people in the community who can really help. Oh no, there is one more group I've been with. So I lived in Florida and our service area was the headquarters of Scientology.
Oh
And
shit.
those people never called. And they wouldn't. Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot about this. One of our service areas was Clearwater, which is this beautiful area that's completely dead and deserted because they bought all the buildings and nobody wants to go there because it's just creepy. And that's right. Yeah, they never call. They never let you use their elevator, which I'm like, we have like a 140-pound stretcher. We can't take the stairs.
Well,
And
how do they must ever call if you've been
strange.
there. But are you saying they
Yeah,
don't?
very serious things. In a big community like that, you would think you would get more like this kid fell down and broke his arm type calls and stuff. But they do have doctors that are within the Scientology religion, and they had a lawsuit before I got there because there's a very close hospital to Clearwater. It's right there. And they decided to take this woman who was dying to the Scientology doctor much further away, and she died. So they got sued from someone or in trouble about that because, you know, they could have they bypassed a perfectly good facility for somewhere further away that, she didn't, like, time is tissue. You can't be
Yeah.
going further than you need to go. You need to get to a doctor emergently. And I think that Scientology likes to like keep things really quiet. I think maybe it was even a suicide, which is why they wanted to keep it like they didn't want people knowing. But Yeah, that was a weird one. Yeah, because you'd see him walking around a little bit, and like you'd be like, "Oh, that's them! Oh God!" Like it's
Like,
so
I
such a
watched a Scientology
strange.
documentary the other day, and
Yes.
you know what's crazy about Scientology as a business is that, like, apparently people have been leaving. Like, a lot of people know now Scientology is a cult. They, like, know a lot of people have spoken out. And so their numbers have gone down. But because of all of the money that they made prior, and because of their tax evasion, and
Mm,
because of getting themselves established as a religion, they didn't have to pay all these back taxes, and they were able to make so much money that they then started investing in real estate.
oh
And
God.
so, business wise, they have like billions of dollars, but now they don't really have that many people. And so, they're in this really wild position to me of like, they have enough money that they can just constantly go after whoever they want. And they
Hmm.
have all these properties and all of these places. Like they have all these organizations that have like lobbyists and whatever, but they don't actually have that much of a group. I mean, they still exist, but like they're not
Yeah.
growing, but they're
Yeah, I
super
think the
rich.
probably like the people who are left were people who are like born and raised who are just like, what the hell am I gonna do? Like, because everybody I know. But I know that like Leah Remini came out and spoke against it, and it's kind of scary. It's kind
It's a
of a
lot of
scary one.
ex-Scientologists. I used to, when I lived in
Yeah.
LA, I would walk by the Scientology
Oh
building
yeah,
often.
that crazy one with the like the
And one day
gold
I was
thing
like,
on it.
one day
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna go in, and then I didn't. I was afraid that if I
Uh,
walked in, I would not get to come back out.
yeah.
And in retrospect, it was probably kind of true. Like I probably would have been hooked in somehow.
I know. I know. I know that about myself too, that I'm like, don't get involved. But yeah, we would like take off our name tags and our badges and stuff if we were going to into one of their buildings because I'm like, I don't want to get like hunted by these people. Like if I see something that I'm not supposed to see, are they gonna like take me out or something? Like I don't
They
know, you know?
could.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go
But
back
yeah,
to
it was not like it was not a lot of calls we went to, but there was
our.
a the ones that yeah, that was crazy.
Well, here's what I
Wow.
want to go back to is
Hmm.
some of the things that people say during grief that are not at all helpful.
Hmm.
Like what are some other things that you heard after or during while your mom was sick or after she died that it's just like the ways that people respond that are just really unhelpful,
Hmm.
if you can remember.
Well, there's a lot of that, like comparing it to somebody who they lost right away, which is like, and it makes you a little angry because you're like, yeah, your dad was 82. Like, you know, how was that? But, you know, it's still a valid loss. You get the like, he's in a better place or she's in a better place. She's, out of pain, which is technically true, but doesn't really help. Like, um, you're lucky you had her as long as you did. She got to come to your wedding, and she got to be at your wedding. It's just like it's the like the beginning of the sentence that the author says in "It's Okay If You're Not Okay." That book. It's like that's the beginning of the sentence. The end of the sentence is, "So stop being in pain." You
Yeah,
know, you got her for a long time, so stop being in pain.
because it's making
She's
me
in a better
uncomfortable.
place. Yes. And I have been that person who's uncomfortable. So I don't fault people too much on not knowing what to say. I'm more like, apart from what people would say, sometimes it's my oldest sister has a huge problem with that. She like is furious when people say anything about it. But for me, I'm like, my anger is just people living their I like people who I'm just furious. People who I not anymore, but I was furious at people who still have moms,
Yeah.
furious at people who have moms that they don't speak to because they have a disagreement. Like, what the fuck? Have, like some petty problem that they like, you have a mom. Go have, like people have been hurt by their moms, but for the most part, it's all petty shit. Like, I see
Also
this
rude,
girl.
this
Yeah,
is important.
yeah,
The anger,
yeah,
whether it's like
yeah,
justified in all scenarios or not, that's how you
yeah.
feel.
And you know, innocent people. Like I see this girl all the time walking in my neighborhood. I see her go by my window or I pass her when I'm walking around, and she's walking with a woman who's clearly her mom because they look similar in the age works. And I'm just like, it makes me so mad. I'm just like, oh, it's not fair. You get that like angst. And it just makes me so mad. I was at the Hallmark store the other day. And this lady, I was buying cards, and this lady's like, "Do you have a rewards card number?" I'm like, "No." And she's like, "Do you have like a mom or a grandma with one?" And I'm like, "No, they're dead."
Did you say
Like
that?
I'm just pissed. Yeah, I said that to her because I was like, "You can't just act like." I mean, it's just like, don't you know my mom is dead? Like, lady. And I lost my grandparents pretty early, all four of them, because they were just the age differences. They were older. Like my grandpa would have been like 120 this year or something. But so I haven't had them for a long time, and they were really amazing grandparents. And so that makes me mad too. And yeah, it's, you overhear someone being like, "Ugh, my mom forgot to pack my salad dressing for my lunch." I'd be like, fucking stupid.
So, okay, but this is
Like,
really important. I
oh,
think.
and cancer
Go ahead.
survivors. Oh, she's survived. Okay, well, good for you. I mean, of course I'm happy. Of course I'm happy for them for living. But I'm also like, yay. Like in my mind, it's not reasonable. It's not logical. It's not.
But
But
it's important because I
yeah.
think that, especially in New Agey spiritual communities, that
Mm,
is looked down upon. Like, you shouldn't feel those things.
mhm.
And in actuality, like, I think I got inundated with a lot of that early on, like when I was quite young. And my brother's accident happened when I was like 19, I just turned 19. And so then I got into all this stuff after that, and a lot of the things that people say are very um like, ultimately, like, your anger's poisoning you, or you shouldn't
Hmm.
have these feelings, or if you have them, you should be allowed to have them, but you should get rid of them soon because they're not good.
Yeah.
And I actually think that the suppression of a lot of that for me really hurt me, because there were so many feelings, and a lot of that came from my childhood too, but it was a lot of like, you shouldn't, if you're feeling angry in this like
You're a bad person.
illogical way, then you shouldn't, because whatever. And so I
Yeah.
think it's healthier to just feel it all, like you're saying, and like, you recognize that uh it's not logical and it's not fair, maybe, to the person,
Yeah.
but like, you still feel that. And I think it's
Hmm.
freeing, like, listening to you say it all. I'm sure anyone listening, like, it feels very
Yes.
free. It feels good for me
And
to listen to.
I want anybody to know who's been through cancer and has been healed. I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so happy you're through it. But in the moment when you have someone who it makes you when you have someone when you see that, you think, so do they mean that my mom was too weak to get through it? So do they mean my mom didn't try hard enough? That's where your mind goes with it. But I'm so happy you're here. For anybody who's survived cancer or anything else like that.
But
You
I
Yeah.
do get sometimes anger or sadness, like, and it happens more rarely now, but I still will get it sometimes. Like, if someone has a brother and they just like
Hmm.
get to have a brother who's an adult, and they just casually are like, oh, like my brother this and his kids that like I feel so irritated.
Yeah.
And it's just a
Enraging.
flash, and I'm not like I'm like, people have
Yeah.
brothers, that's fine. But it's just
Yeah.
that still in me of this like, oh, like I don't ever get to know
Yeah.
what that is. My brother's still
Why do you have a
alive.
brother so loud? Like, geez. Like, why is your, yeah, yeah, it is hard because it is like an envy thing too, so much. And that's
Yeah.
another one of those like ugly emotions you should try to get rid of is envy, which I am envious of everyone who has like a loving, I mean, that's what it is. Like the girl who walks around my neighborhood is envy. It's like I'm so, and that I feel like is sort of like a subcategory of anger, maybe, or maybe vice versa. But yeah, it's that's a big one that they really they don't want to touch that in new age stuff. They're like, just make peace with things. And you're
Or
like,
sometimes people say like, you welcome it and it's all good. And like I think there's a line there too of it's not that you want to like uh live from it and like let it rule your life and suddenly you just
mm-hmm,
like, but there's a giving it space to be and recognizing like,
mm-hmm,
oh, I'm feeling envy and that's
mm-hmm,
fine, and
mm-hmm.
like it doesn't mean anything, like it's just showing me
And
I'm sad, I miss my mom.
I also like strayed very far from the new age thinking. Like most of my thinking was like, does anything really matter? Like,
Yeah.
does it matter to be a good person to like nothing matters? That's where my brain went for a really long time. And that couldn't be further from what, you're trying to practice, but there's just that's off the spectrum of what can be taught in new it's just off it's it's too far to one direction that they don't like what like there's no meditation lessons on that kind of thing. They're like you come from the basis from the foundation that every little thing matters. That so it's you find yourself in your mind in like these crazy places that you never thought you'd be. But then you look back and you're like, okay, I never thought that would happen to me. I was just like those other people, like that can't happen to me. That.
Yeah.
So
How
never
long
thought you'd
ago
have to deal with that.
how long has it been now since you lost your mom?
Um, she died in 2022, October 8th, 2022. So it's been almost 3 years,
Wow.
which is crazy. Yeah, it's wild.
Mhm. Yeah, I
But
think our experience of grief too changes year after year. And I don't even think that
mm,
it gets like, I think easier is the wrong word because it gets
mm.
less all encompassing.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, like the first year for me after my brother's accident happened was just a blur. And then I had a lot
Hmm.
of other things happen because then I had a friend die and then my grandparents died, like, and my parents divorced, and it was just
Hmm.
like after one after the other. But it's funny, I was talking to somebody. Who was I speaking with? I can't even remember who I was talking to, but someone who uh had all she her brother had died when she was
Hmm.
young as well. And she said, like, how long has it been since your brother's accident? And I said, well, I mean, now it's been like over 13 years.
Wow.
And she was like, oh, that's so recent still. And
Yes.
I was like, it is? I was like, I feel
Well,
like that's like a large
I mean,
portion of my life, but to her, it had been whatever 20 something years, and like she had had that experience of how it changes over time. And
and I think like, you know, think of how many years you loved him
yeah.
and you still do. And that's how I think about my mom is like grief lasts as long as love lasts. And it's part of the vulnerability of loving someone.
Yeah.
Even getting married is vulnerable. You're like, something could happen and they could,
Oh, it's
like, my heart could
terrible. The
be
closer you
torn
get.
open.
Yeah.
Yes. And
And
so
I
it's
imagine
like
having
when
a
you,
baby, right?
oh God, yeah. Oh God. Yeah. It's like, it's terrifying to ever think about anything bad ever happening to your child. Even if, like, the first time he gets sick, I'm gonna, like, lose it. Like, even just anything, you just, right from when they appear. I personally, with both my nephew and my son, I was like, I would die for you. I don't even know you, but I would die for you. Like,
Yeah.
this immediate reaction. And that's, um so yeah, with your brother, with my mom, it's, there's no there's no limit to how long the grief would last. I think, for me at least, I can't speak for you, I suppose, but for me, there's no, I mean, it's not going to be the same. It's not the same now as it was when it first happened, but it hurts just as bad, but probably just not as often.
I
Yeah.
think that the different kinds of death have different levels of impact. And then, of course, it depends on who the person was, right? Like, my grandmother died like a very pretty normal old person death. And so,
Hmm.
like, that, what, like, sometimes I'll be like, oh, I miss my grandmother. We were close, and, but that was a pretty normal, typical death. And so, like, in that way,
Yeah.
it doesn't, I don't, it doesn't live on in me in the same way.
Mm.
Whereas my grandfather's death was a bit more intense because it wasn't just like that. And so that I feel like I have a bit more around. And then of course my brother's situation is a super weird one because he's still alive.
Hmm.
So for anybody who doesn't know, like he was in a car accident and he has a brain injury, a traumatic brain injury, but he was in a coma for a long time and they said
Oh
he was going to be
gosh.
brain dead. They said they should never have operated on him because he was so brain dead. And then they said he would
Oh,
never come back. And then over the years, he sort of regained.
wow.
Uh, it's weird, They say like, you probably know this, having a medical background, but like, I thought he's in a coma. He's gonna like wake up from the coma. He did not just one day wake up from the coma. It was like
Mm.
a couple months after the accident, he like opened one eye and it like looked up to the side. And then it was
Wow.
like months after that, it was like the other eye sort of opened. And like then it was like, oh, I think he
Wow.
can hear us because like he can sort
Wow.
of try to look at things. Like it was really slow and each stage. And for me, I still feel this. And I was talking to Jordan about this the other day because I don't know that this is even useful for me anymore, but there's what's true in my body is that there's an ongoing sense of like it's still happening because like after
Mm.
the accident happened, first of all, it was like I lost my brother was dead because I've never
Mm.
gotten that brother back. He
Mhm.
doesn't get to have like the life he would have. He's alive, but he's a different person in a lot of ways, even though he
Mhm.
remembers everything. And I'm grateful that he does because we can like talk about memories and
Wow.
stuff. And he relearned to talk. I don't know when that happened,
That's
sometime in.
incredible.
It's incredible. He's like a miracle, right? But it's also like I was grieving my brother, but then I had a new brother
Mhm.
and then with the new brother, it was like he could still die at any moment, was how it felt.
Mm. Gosh, yeah.
And so there was this constant, like, ongoing. I've never said this publicly before, so I hope my family doesn't listen because I don't know how it would feel for them. So if they're listening, maybe they
Mhm.
could pause. But, there was a period, maybe a year or two in, I don't remember when it happened, maybe a few years after the accident, where he almost died. Like there was, I don't really want to say what it was, but I thought he was dead. Like I saw something had happened and I thought he was dead.
Oh gosh.
And what happened in my body, was this like extreme, uh, like horror and fear, but there was also this sense of relief of like it's over, like it's finally over. And that I was
Hmm.
even more horrified about, because when you talk about having all these different emotions, right? Like feeling
Hmm.
anger, what, like it was like unreasonable, but also like I realized that it was like, and I think I still feel that, where it's like year after year, he still occasionally will have something come up where it's like, oh, Damon's in the hospital, or oh, he, you know, he has another
Hmm.
there, and there's this sense of like it
Hmm.
still is, it still isn't over. The horror of the accident is still happening 13 years
Yeah.
later. And
Yeah.
I've grieved my brother a lot of times, but I also like he's still here. It's so weird.
Yeah.
And I was saying to
Yeah.
Jordan the other day, in some sense, everybody is on their way to dying. So it's not like,
Hmm.
I don't know that it's even true that it's like an ongoing continuation of the act. Like I don't know that it's helpful for me to have it framed that way, but that is,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think about that too, like I think that's why these periods of time are so interesting to me, even like the period of time where your mom was sick, because there's like this, there's grief, but you can't grieve it because it's like,
Hmm.
you know she's gonna die, but she hasn't died. And so you're
Yeah.
in this sort of stuck place of like, there's grief, but it's a weird grief.
Yeah. And I really tried to not show her how upset I was when I was with her. I was in nursing school and I was flying from Pennsylvania to Seattle like every weekend. Um, like red eye Friday night, red eye Sunday night. And so sort of towards the end, I was thinking like this could be the last time I see her. I might not be here to see her. And I feel like I just let that out a little bit. And she told me, like, as I was saying goodbye, because, you know, you feel like, is this the goodbye?
Yeah.
She said, I need you to be strong for me. And that was the kind of person she is. Maybe, um, you know, that's not the easiest thing to ask your daughter, but that was the kind of person she was. And she said, I need you to be strong for me. And so I tried to be, but you know, I've told you the story of the end of her life where it was kind of miraculous. We all got to be together, and um, so it wasn't the last time I saw her, but it was uh, it was hard in those moments because it is grieving because you think, oh, is this the end? But then it's not quite. And but I even feel that way about older folks because in the medical system I mean this might sound harsh, but we keep people alive like a really
Yeah.
long time now. And so you could have, like, I think about it, I'm like, would I want to live those last 10 years if they were full of suffering and memory loss and it was like a burden on the system and my family? Or would I want to just be like, you know, living my life, having a great time, and then just like brain aneurysm? Like, which,
Yeah.
like, would I rather have, you know, you don't, it probably at the end of the day, I would be like, I want to live as long as possible. But also, I think it might be an American thing, a Western thing to like, there's a lot of times when you go on 911 calls and you're like, you want me to do CPR on this 96-year-old woman,
Yeah.
break her sternum, put a tube in her throat. It's just, but you know, that's family's choice and it's hard to let go. It's hard to
Yeah.
let go. And people don't have the foresight because they just think, save her, save her, save her.
Yeah.
But they don't think, like, where's this going? Like, what's her
Yeah.
quality of life going to be if we do these difficult and painful interventions? Like, like, your brother is an incredible example of what we'd call return of
Mhm.
neurofunction. That doesn't happen for most people.
No.
Especially like in heart attacks and stuff, like when, you know, your brain hasn't been perfusing for a long time because your heart stopped unless you have CPR very quickly. And so we resuscitate people all the time where I'm just like, oh gosh, this is, why are we doing this? That's why it's very, very important to have your end of life wishes communicated to your loved ones. So that's
It's
paramedics'
a
view of
really
it. But
it's a hard thing. I mean, I think about this a lot because I've thought about it many times because of course now if you were to say like, do you wish your brother had died then? I'm like, no, I love my brother. I don't want my brother to die. Like I
hmm
love him. We still get to like laugh and have something.
hmm
And there is this kind of question like right when Jordan and I started dating, something he asked me, and I think when you've been through a lot, like it just meant a lot to me because he asked me, he said, "Do you ever wish your brother had died?" And it was like
hmm
such a uh, question most people would not ask, you know? And I
You're like,
was
oh.
appreciative that he asked me because I knew that he understood
hmm
grief. Like I was like, he gets it.
hmm
Um, because it's a question, like, there were surgeons, there was the surgeon who was there that day went against what any other surgeon would have done and he decided to operate.
hmm
And the other surgeons were not shy about telling us that. They were extremely blunt and extremely like if we were here that never would have happened. He's going to be a
Wow.
vegetable forever. They were like extremely,
Wow.
and at the time I hated them. And now I'm sort of like in that side, like you've seen more of that side
hmm
of things. Like they know a lot more. I've spent a lot of time at brain injury rehab places and I
hmm
know what it looks like.
Yeah.
Like those places were horrible places to be. Everyone seems like half dead if they're not being violent and they're like
hmm
barely there and they're awful places to go.
hmm
And that could have, in most cases like that would have been how my brother ended up. I don't know why it didn't, like somehow through a combination of a lot of things. Some is luck,
hmm
but some is also like uh I think we never left him for a second. Like it was
Wow.
we were extremely uh me, my mom, or my dad was always like sleeping next to his bed, like on top of the nurses, on top of the staff, probably being annoying in a lot of cases. But it was like, he needs to be getting this care. You have to be like, they messed things up and we would
hmm
find out. And like, there was a lot of stuff. And I think through many different things like and we had a lot of resources to do so, a lot of
hmm
families they have to go back to work or whatever. My dad had his
hmm
own company so he could, like, my mom could be there, I could be there, I just didn't go back to school. Like there were these things, but I think about like in an alternative reality my brother would have just died and that would have been
hmm
horrible, but it would have been more clean in that sense of like
hmm
it's ended and now the family sort of somehow reorients and tries to
hmm
move forward. Instead, it created so much other stuff and still does.
Yeah, it's weird because when someone dies, it's like, especially a young person, you grieve like what could have been. Like,
Yeah.
oh, he could have. I mean, not saying he can't get married and everything, but like,
Well, he's
have a
not going
future.
to. I mean, it's
I
just
don't I
honest.
don't know his
I know
yeah,
you
yeah,
don't know his situation,
yeah, yeah,
but no, he's not gonna get married. He's not gonna live alone. He's gonna live with my
yeah.
mom and then probably with my sister
So
until he
you
dies.
grieve that when someone dies, but it's almost like it when you see the person, it's like a you might feel that heartbreak every time because you're like you're still here, but you don't have that option
Yeah.
anymore. So I could see how it's like, yeah, less clean, less just a little bit like burns a little bit every
Hmm.
time you see him in a different way.
I talked to too, like, I connected with a girl, a woman who had a very similar thing. Like one day, a couple years ago, I wrote a piece about like the anniversary of my brother's accident, and someone wrote to me, and she had had like a very similar thing happen with her brother, where
Hmm.
he just like extremely similar. He was in a different kind of accident, but like it was eerie to talk to her. And it actually
Yeah.
like brought so much up for me that I was like, and both of us, like, I was just like, I don't actually know if it's like healthy for us to connect over this. Like, it's
Hmm.
really intense. But
Hmm.
her brother, like, my brother, for some reason, is happy all the time. He has very
Hmm.
stable, I don't know what he is tapped into, but he's just like on a different level of just,
Positivity and for the
yes.
situation.
And you want to like
Wow.
think he's enlightened sometimes, but then he'll just say something like really dirty and inappropriate or like really like just not at all that, and you're like, I don't know. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know what to think.
Yeah.
But like her brother has much more common like issues with, violence, or his tempers or he like reacts differently.
Yeah.
And that's all, like, that's harder, that's it's I don't know. So I think a lot about like, yeah, we've progressed to this point where we can, like you said, keep people alive. And you've seen
Hmm.
that like in different cases where it's like, yeah, is performing CPR in this 95-year-old woman like, it's a hard choice because no one wants to be like, yeah, let this person I love die.
And there's people in medicine will know this, but like in when someone has a heart attack, their heart stops beating, cardiac arrest, there's fixable ones and there's not fixable ones. And so when you get that non-fixable ones, you're like, I mean, there's a chance. It's a non-zero chance, but it's very rare that you're going to get, we call it ROSC, return of spontaneous circulation, on that kind of person. Because there's no electricity in your heart, and then there's disorganized electricity that's not a good band name, disorganized electricity. But like, there's disorganized electricity that's not effective in perfusing your body, and that is we can work with that. We can fix that sometimes, but there's nothing. A lot of times, there's especially if they've had like a prolonged downtime, it's not looking good, and families just it's again it's hard to let go. But I have refined my speech as a paramedic when we're on like minute 14, minute 15, minute 16, and there's been no signs that we're going to resuscitate this person. And so I've had that conversation dozens of times with families, um, because ultimately they're the ones who have to say like, okay, we can stop efforts. We can't just obviously do that on our own. That would be neglect. And um, but yeah, we having that conversation and making it just clear that like this is no longer going anywhere. It really feels really wrong to be working and working and working on somebody who it's just like it feels disrespectful to their body to continue all these things when you at the point when you know like this is you know maybe lightning strikes, but 99.9% of the time if you're on minute 20, 25, 30, that's the time to have a talk with the family. And um actually, I don't know if this is going in a strange direction, but I have had two people with near death experiences who we were able to resuscitate who came back a couple months later, and they had an out of body experience. And it gives me great comfort to hear these things because if you look into it, it's actually lots of people have had really similar experiences. And they always, I mean, there are details that they tell us. There is no way they could have known that by asking people who were there. There is no way. Like, I mean, little things like my partner and I driving to the call. And I remember the station we used to listen to always had like two Queen songs in a row. I don't know why, because it just, I don't know, that's what it did. And the person said, like there was nobody they knew there. I mean, nobody they knew. And they could say what we were talking about when we got out and we were getting our equipment and what song was playing. There was in the other one, I it was a couple months later, so I remembered this that I had broken my Apple Watch. And so they told me like, oh, you kept going like this, but there was no like to look at the times, but there was no watch there, which was weird. They knew some of the people who were their names, which you could find that out if you call the fire station or something. But and then they remembered, what we were doing, like if we shocked them and stuff like that, which is information available to them, but it's kind of hard to get. Like it's not
Yep.
like on your chart. It's like something you'd have to dig around to get, which and then there's other things that they said they saw that are comforting to me, like that it was beautiful and loving and comfortable, that they were at peace and that they weren't afraid of death anymore because they saw that side of things. But no matter what you believe, I thought that was pretty incredible that they came back and shared that with us, because we don't get a lot of follow up like that. But I mean, there's just no denying that there were things that they said there was no way they could have known, that
Yeah.
anybody else there could have told them. There's no way.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's a
I
piece of me
totally believe in
that's,
all those things. There's so many
yeah,
stories like that. How could
yeah,
you,
that
like,
are,
there's just so many, like,
and
near death
apparently they're pretty
experiences.
consistent in like the elements of them. I haven't looked into it much, but um, even just those two people had this like view of everything that was sort of like above normal senses. Like vision was just like all encompassing, and like they could hear a lot, everything, and see everything. For a long ways around, they saw things that happened. Like maybe there was a witness to it, and they were unconscious. The person said, "Oh, that person was unconscious at that point," and they knew what had happened. Oh, that man went over to that person's car and asked that person to call 911. It's things like that which are like gives me a little peace to think that there could be an afterlife, and a peaceful place. And one thing, I've never said this to anybody before, but one thing that I think about, and it's like a feeling I have that came out of nowhere one day, is when a baby dies, right? When we've had calls where babies die, and you hear about kids, in school shootings who die so young. And I can just see my mom and other mothers like holding their hands out and and welcoming those children. I feel it and I see it, and I don't know if it's just something my brain does to comfort myself in like these painful moments, but I don't know. I can just feel it. Just a
Yeah.
feeling that I get because that was who she was. And it makes me feel like those children are safe with her and safe with, mothers who've passed away. So
That's really beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah. I really think there is something to these senses and these feelings like that. Like I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of consistency, I think, in the things people say with it. Yeah.
And then you have my brother who we tried to for a while. We would try to be like, what was it like? Like, do you remember? Like, maybe he had a near death experience. He could tell us,
Mm-hmm.
like, to try to mine for it. And one day,
Hmm.
I'm gonna remember this wrong, but so there was something like, my mom asked him, and he started telling her like something about God and all, and he like had her going, and then it turned out he was just
Oh,
quoting a Family Guy scene.
just like fucking with her. And
So
she's like,
he'll fuck with people like
it's
that.
only
Like he'll
stupid.
do that. Like people have
Yeah.
asked him before, like, and he'll lead them. And so that's when you're like, are you are you having a spiritual experience? Maybe he's the most spiritual of all.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah.
But yeah, there's
See.
I've heard too of really cool stories like I don't know if you know who Jack Cruz is. He's like a
I do not.
neurosurgeon guy. He talks a lot about light, like the importance of light for our health and water, but he has shared stories of him operating, and he's had people come back. Like there was a woman who got a heart transplant, and when they gave her the new heart, she suddenly had this intense craving for McDonald's French fries. And she was
Wow.
like, she kept coming back being like, I just don't understand. Like, since I got this new heart, I have this intense craving. I've never eaten, like, it's never been a thing for me. Like, what's going on? And it turned out when she was finally able to talk to Jack, I believe that Jack was like, he had tried to save the boy before he had died, and the boy who
Hmm.
had given the heart. And so basically, she had gotten the heart from this young boy who I think was in a car accident, but he was eating McDonald's French fries like right as he died. And like, there's those
Wow.
things like, it's like and he thinks it's because like we leave imprints on the water in our bodies memory wise. And so he thought like the heart had that imprint on it. It's just like
Hmm.
crazy things where it's like, I don't know who knows the explanation, but when you're faced with stories like
Hmm.
that, and he has many stories like that where you're just like, that's super weird.
Nothing gets you more than when you see like someone who's had a heart transplant and like the mother of the donor is like listening with a stethoscope to her
Oh
son's heart
no.
or something. I mean, like, I think organ donation is really beautiful. I'd actually like to work in that field someday because I just think it's like, I mean, making like someone who's in an accident like that, they take everything they can. They take everything they can, like retinas, like everything. And you can change so many lives. And it's like your body is giving to so many people. And I think it's just like the most beautiful thing to, if I'm not saying there's a silver lining to everything. That's not what I'm saying. That it's, I'm just saying that it's something for the family to be like, he's a hero
Yeah.
or she's a hero, you know? So I think that's just always been fascinating and beautiful part of medicine, which I'm like, that's incredible that we can do that. It's incredible. And, you know, things like traumatic car accidents and things like that, young people, we always try to continue to keep those people perfusing, keep the oxygen going to their body just in case they can either be resuscitated, have surgery, or they can save so many other people with their body, you know?
Yeah.
So, mm,
Was there anything that did help you in your grief? Like anything someone said, or like a sort of attitude or belief? Like what were
no,
helpful?
not that people said, but what I did, and so you heard that I wrote one poem. That's the only
Right.
poem I ever
Mm-hmm.
wrote in my whole life. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. One day I sat down, I was like, I think I'm going to write a poem, and I haven't written one after that.
Oh,
But I mean, I've always been a musician and very, like, I like to think a creative person, but I don't think I'm much of a poet. But one day, I've never written a song, never. And one day I just sat down and I was like, I'm just going to think so deeply, especially about that last week. and I'm going to write some song. I'm going to write a song. And it took me, and I did not force it. I did not make it something that I was like, I have to finish this or I have to sit down and do this. I just was like, whenever I felt like doing it, I continued. And I actually wrote 4 songs, and they're actually in the process of being like final mastering right now. A friend of mine is mastering them, but I don't plan on really sharing them. And I mean, like, I don't know. They're probably not any good. They're just, what came out of me at the time. But
I
I'm actually
see.
really proud of the fact that I even did that, which is so bizarre because I've never written music. And that was probably, I mean, that's so healing. And when I listen to the songs, it's like it lands so much. And yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna share them or not.
If
I
you
don't know.
knew
Like,
if you knew that they were good, would you release them?
I mean, I guess so. I think they are, except for one that I wrote about my nephew or for my nephew or something. I think they're very sad sounding. So they're very mournful. They're very sad sounding. They feel like grief songs, So
Everybody
I don't know
who's
that anybody
listening,
wants
I'll
to
tell
listen to
you,
them.
everyone who's listening is like, why doesn't she release these?
I mean, I in my mind, I think they're good, but they're. It was just something. The reason I don't, I might put them like on SoundCloud or something, but it was just something I did for me.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's almost been almost 3 years. It took me almost 3 years to get kind of through that. But that is just, I mean, music has always been like the most healing thing to me. It's like my first addiction. I've always just been so obsessed with music. And it just makes sense that that is something that would like help soothe me. So, I mean, my sisters and having the shared experience is the other thing. Those are probably the two biggest things. My sisters, that shared experience, that leaning on each other, being able to vent and say whatever the hell we want about it, and just be like, "Oh, this pissed me off today," or "Oh, I miss mom so much." Like, or my sister will say like, "God, I wish I could ask her about this." And that happens all the time. Like, oh, I wish especially having a son now, like, oh gosh, I wish I knew. And that's one of the deepest pieces of the grief is like, you feel like, I don't know if this is the case with anybody else, but with mothers, you feel like part of you dies too, because there's so much that a mother knows about you that nobody else could ever understand or know, that you feel like all of those things, your little mom conversations when you were a toddler, the little moments, it's like they're gone. They're gone with her. That's what it feels like. Um, so, you know, with my sisters, it's like they're the people who understand the most, and everybody grieves differently, but for me, it's like they get that too. And I think maybe a lot of other people, I haven't met a lot of people who've lost their moms, honestly, or talk about it, but I think that's a common thread because, I mean, I know and you'll feel this so deeply when you have a child. It's like they, you are the person that is their lifeline when they're a baby. And like I'm like 7 months in, so you know, I'm new, but I mean, from the time they're born, like they're okay with other people, but they know, they love you so deeply, know you so deeply because they've been with you since like the moment, they existed. So losing your mom feels like losing that connection to the one person who knows you the best. But,
You have
I
a
do think
loving and good
sometimes
mother.
how lucky I am
Yeah.
to have had that because a lot of people don't. I do
It
feel that
sounds
too.
it sounds like you had a really like good mother as well. like someone
Hmm.
who was really there for you and could be
Yes.
there with you and see you, and like you had that kind of support from her.
Hmm. Yes. Yes. And I know that that makes me like a lucky person in this world because not everybody gets that.
Yeah.
Um, and then as a medic, something you hear a lot when people are dying is a lot of, you know, people of faith will say prayers when people are dying. And one of the ones that that's always landed for me is the 23rd Psalms and what you like like it, you know, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. I don't know if you know, like, familiar with that, probably one of the most famous Bible verses, but I think about the phrase like, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I won't be afraid. And to me, it's like, walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It implies almost that it's not going to last forever, that that the extreme darkness, the shadow of death is not going to last. You walk through it, you're not living in there.
Yeah.
And then shadows sounds a little, you know, cheesy, but shadows are just evidence of light. You know, they're just evidence that light exists. So that's always been something that I think about and that, um, and it, you know, when you think about life in general, it's like, I also think about physics and, you know, the idea that energy can't be created or destroyed.
Yeah.
You know, it's just transferred to other things. So you do feel like, you know, that goes back to sort of the near death experience things that like people are still, you know, they're in something, you know, for anyone who's had somebody close to them die, you're going to see a bird and be like, that's her, she's there, she's that bird sitting on the roof. You know, when you need it the most, you'll be like, oh my God, a deer ran across the road. It's her. That's mom, you know. Like, I think a lot of people know that experience when you're like, you see a monarch butterfly and you're like, hi mom, you know.
My dad did that with a bird the other day. He was talking about his
Yeah.
brother. He was like, that was him.
Yes. Yes, I think that's kind of universal where you're just like, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. There's so, you know, I've kind of been uh being in the circle and stuff, talked with you guys about it throughout the year, so it definitely evolves and shifts the grief. So,
Yeah. I think that for me, the most helpful thing that I heard that I was so, and you've probably heard me share this before, like the most helpful, because a lot of people said unhelpful things. Um, you know, and like I don't care how, like, I don't think it matters how, maybe it's different for people, but like for me, no matter how spiritual or religious or how many deep beliefs I held, somebody trying to like tell me them or share theirs with me right after you've lost someone is not useful. Like it was never
mm-mm,
helpful for me.
mm-mm,
Like I kind of can now, as I've come to finding God and like I can take this sort of solace in God has a plan, and I can land there. But somebody
mm-hmm.
saying that to me like right when it's like not helpful. And if Jordan
Mm-mm.
died, God forbid, tomorrow, and someone was like, God has a plan, I'd be like, go away. Like fucking leave me alone.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
it's just not like I think that these bigger picture spiritual beliefs we can try to go to them, but when the most human things
Mm-hmm.
happen, they're not always like sometimes and so the most helpful thing someone had said to me early on, and it was actually like a private yoga lesson when I had gone to the studio. I had like told her everything that had happened. I'll never forget this moment because I thought for sure, like everybody previously had acted. It was probably, it had happened like 2 months prior. And everyone was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like they feel so sorry for me. And this woman was just like, she was like, she did not say any of that. And she was just like, what if you could just be in it?
Mm-hmm.
And I was, at the time, I had like an ego flare. Like I was just like, how could she say it to me? She doesn't get it. And then
Mm-hmm.
like within a few hours, I was like, what if I could just be in it? And I liked that because it wasn't trying to change it. It wasn't trying to make me
Mm-hmm.
feel differently. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
trying to say that it was actually secretly a good thing that it had happened. It was just like, can you just be? Can you just exist and be present
Mm-hmm.
in everything that's happening? And there's something, I don't know if like is the right word, but like in all of the death type of like losses that I've experienced, something that I appreciate about them is the forced presence that it tends to bring. Like nothing
Mm-hmm.
else matters. You know, it's suddenly
Mm-hmm.
just like you're just there and you're with life and you're just like, whoa.
Yeah. You're
Like,
like, I'm small. I got no, I have no power.
and you're
I
connected to
have,
that love
yeah,
typically for the
yeah,
person. And you're just like, wow, this is
yeah.
all that matters. And I don't care about anything else.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, I would give anything in the world. I mean, not my son, but I would give anything in the world to have just one conversation with my mom,
Yeah.
and that's not a perspective you could actually grasp before
Yeah.
you've lived it, I think.
Do you,
So,
would you
you know,
want to say anything in particular, or you would just want to interact with her?
I think just interact with her. Um, I mean, you always want to be like, I didn't say thank you enough. I didn't say I love you enough. I didn't say it enough during life. Nobody, you can't possibly say it enough, you know. So that's also a perspective I have now is I tell everybody like, I love you. Like, you don't, you can't say it enough. So, mhm, yeah, yeah. And I'm sure with your brother, it's like your urge to go back and change it. You're like, oh, if I could have, done something, if something different would have happened that night, if I had called you and you would have been home for a little bit longer or whatever, like there's the urge to change things.
Yeah, I think like I don't know if I felt that. It's always felt kind of for
Hmm.
me like useless. It's like a useless thought, I guess.
That's true.
'Cause like there's all sorts of things. I mean, the one that I really probably the one that I most still feel because there were so many things. It was actually my uncle's car. Like my brother, it was in the middle of the afternoon. It was like a nice
Mm,
sunny day in December, December 3rd, 2011. Um, and my brother was taking my uncle was away. It was like my uncle's sports car, and my brother was an excellent driver. He loved to drive, loved cars, and he was with his friend, and they were taking care maybe of the dog at my uncle's house. And he
hmm.
texted my uncle, and he said like, can I drive your car?" And my uncle said, "Yes, be safe." And that was that.
Yeah,
But it was the
yeah.
car malfunctioning, and so the thing I don't really think back to like I haven't really spent any time being like, oh, if my uncle had said no or what, because it's just sort of like I feel like a useless thought exercise. But what I do still feel a bit of is like this rage. I don't know if it's quite rage anymore, but there's this sort of set like somebody somewhere made a decision on purpose that
Mm,
led to this result.
mm,
Like somebody
yeah.
somewhere, allegedly, at this company sat there and they had a discussion over how much
Mm,
money do we lose if we recall these cars and how much money do we
wow.
lose if we don't by paying out
Oh,
settlements. And then they
yeah, that's a mind
decided,
fuck. Yeah,
and so that is the thing that still gets me
yeah.
is the like it was a preventable
How
decision.
did your uncle cope with that? Was it
I don't
pretty
know.
hard on him? You don't
My
know?
uncle
Oh,
is really private.
okay.
Yeah. Like a lot of my mom's side of the family. Like they are not a very emotional
Yeah. Not that I would want him to blame himself. I mean, that would be, but it
I
seems
think
like
he
that could be a
struggled for
response.
sure. You know what though? I think he struggled for sure, but I think that anybody else's struggles were sort of so far out. Like, I wonder sometimes about my brother's friend. My brother had a friend with him in the car, and
Hmm.
luckily, the friend was pretty much fine. Like, I think they had to check his appendix or something,
Wow.
but he was fine, and so he witnessed the
Wow.
whole thing. He watched my brother,
Yeah.
like, he saw, the paramedics come. He saw, like, all of that. He was there. And I wonder sometimes about him. I've never spoken to him since.
You've never spoken to him.
Like, I've spoken to him when my brother was 17, so like his friends came and visited after. And so like I would
Hmm.
see him, but I never sat down with this kid and was like, tell me what you saw. My mom did
Yeah.
that because the police needed it. Like they needed it for whatever, the lawyers and all these things. And I've
So he's
thought
not still
about
friends
it.
with your brother, I guess.
What?
He's not still friends with your brother, I
No,
guess.
basically none of them are. I mean, they all went on and they lived their lives, which I
Yeah.
know uh some people in my family were like felt resentment about that and I
Oh,
get
I
it.
would.
But I also get the other side, like people do, like they were 18, they're going to live their life. But I just like I've thought about I could reach out to this guy as but it's like I don't even think I need to. But I have wondered, like, how did he cope? He had his whole own experience with that and moved on. My
Hmm.
brother's best friend, who I then dated, like, he lost his best friend. Like, all these people had their own version of the loss in that experience, and I don't think that anyone in my immediate family really knows a lot about what the other ones are because ours was so immediate and overtaking.
Well,
Like
you
no
had to
one,
take care of him. Those people
yeah,
didn't have any
yeah. So no one was
responsibility
gonna
to that.
tell me anything about their side of the story because I was like in the hospital with my brother.
Yeah.
Like no one.
Yeah.
Those were the worst people. I'll just say so the people would come into the ICU if we'd finally let them in, and they would start crying, which I understand. I'm not blaming people, but it was like then it would be like now I we have to take care of you, and like I'm supposed to be the one you're taking, like I'm supposed to be the one you're
Yeah.
comforting, but now you're like having a breakdown while you're in front of my brother and I'm like trying to make you feel better and
Yeah.
like this is just a mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But everyone tries their
Oh.
best. My
Hmm.
best friend was at the time was my brother's age, and because he was 2 years younger than me, and we had a lot of like overlapping friends, and I was annoyed with her because she was too happy. I felt like she would come and she would talk about like school and what was going on at school and all these, and I was just like, you're too happy,
Yeah.
go away. Like, but it wasn't her fault. Like people just they can't.
I
And
had a
that's the
friend
thing,
like
like you
that
were
at
saying,
school.
there's no one can be perfect. Like
No.
what you need in that situation is just kind of someone to like be present and be loving you and just like kind of just sit there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I remember I had a friend. I was in nursing school and I was telling her, like, oh, I think they're just giving me good grades because they feel sorry for me. And she was like, why? I was like, because my mom died 2 weeks ago. Like, she's like, oh, and just moving on. Oh, but it's like, what am I gonna do? Be like pissed? Like at that, you're annoyed at the time because you're like, really? Do you think I was like over it by now or
I
what?
will
But
say my professors, I remember. There's these things you like, I just remember, like, because I had to take finals. So it happened right before my finals in my first semester of college. And
yeah,
one of them was really understanding and was basically just like, don't worry about it at all. Don't take the final. I'll just give you your grade. Another one was like, he still made me write my paper, but he gave me like a month or two extension, which
hmm,
I was mad, but I ended up being grateful for because it gave me something else to focus on.
hmm,
Um, and then the third guy was such an asshole. I was in a film class and he was just like, he was like, no, you have to turn in your final project. And I was like, I can't. Like, my school is in Ohio. I'm home 8 hours away in Pennsylvania. I was like, I can't finish making a film. My brother is in the
Like,
ICU and he might die. I'm
okay,
not gonna
calm
like
down. You're a film teacher. Like, you're taking
also
yourself a little seriously. Like,
also that. It was
yeah,
just like no. And then finally after he agreed to like grade me on what I had done so far for the project, but I
yeah,
still think I got like a C or a B. Like he just and I was like, "Can you not be at all just a little bit nice in what I'm going through?"
yeah,
He was
yeah,
just so uncaring and wanted me to
yeah,
finish making this film project
yeah.
on
Like, do
time.
you think that's even remotely a priority right now?
But that's the thing too, right? Is what I was saying about like it does make you feel like what actually even mattered. One of my first experiences with death, actually probably my first ever like real experience. I guess I had an aunt that died when I was really young, but I didn't really know her, and I don't think we went to the funeral. My first funeral was my grandmother on my dad's side, who we were not super close with, my dad's parents, but she died. I think I was 15, and maybe younger, but I was the only one of my siblings, maybe my older sister came, she must have come, but she's my half sister. She wasn't in our household.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we went, and I remember I still can imagine like the coffin going down into
Ooh.
the ground and me
Mm-hmm.
standing there, and it was my first ever, like I had such a clear realization of like, is this is it? Like this is what happens when you die, and
Mm-hmm.
so then what's the purpose of anything?
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
was this real clear like everyone's taking everything so seriously in life and none of it seems to matter because like her body's just going into the ground. So
yeah,
like it forces you kind of into that these
yeah, yeah. I know, I think about that when I was in nursing school, I was working on a floor where they'd occasionally have hospice patients who were in like the last day or two. And we would go in and just sort of like make sure they were clean and they had, medicine on board to keep their pain under control, but they were not lucid. And but there's not a lot we can do. We can't sit in there. We have so many patients. Like any nurse can't sit in there. And so we would just like put on the oldie station, like on the music, and then be like, okay, we'll be back in 2 hours or something like, or until we see that your monitor is flat. But it's just kind of like this person had a whole life.
yeah.
They lived a whole life. They were someone's brother and son, probably someone's son. They were, like they had a job. And I just like, I can't, that there's something in healthcare where you like, you have empathy, but especially in emergency medicine, like you basically have to be a mechanic just fixing a
You have
body.
to detach a little bit, yeah.
You have to detach a little. And as a nurse, you're just like, oh, I can't go, I can't take everybody's, I can't be a grief mop. I can't take everybody's grief on. And as a paramedic, it serves the person more to be a mechanic
Yeah.
fixing a body than it does for you to be like, there. You know, you
Yeah.
feel that in your heart, but you have to move quickly and accurately and not be distracted by overwhelming emotions. And that's also speaks to just like the kind of person who's in EMS can put that aside for a second to help people. Whereas, there's people tell me all the time, like, I could never do that. I could never do what you do. And I think it's because it's like overwhelming to see that kind of thing. And they wouldn't be able to put things aside. And some things get to you. Things definitely get to you every once in a while, especially afterwards. But I do try in the moment to be like, how can I actually stay focused and help this person? You know?
Yeah.
So, mhm.
Yeah, and I remember you mentioning like the humor that can come along with that. Uh
Yeah.
to help cope,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, I mean, we just, it's a very, very close knit community because a lot of times you're working 24 or 48-hour shifts. It's definitely like, feels like family. And so you have to have that. Obviously, we're not joking about some of the things that are extremely serious. And, like nobody is making jokes about children who are dead or dying. Nobody's making jokes about that. But a lot of times you can see the humor in situations because you're seeing so much of life. You're going into people's homes. You're going to so many strangers' homes. It's just like you see crazy sides of life. I think about how many strangers' homes I've been in, and it's just hilarious to me to be like, wow, I've seen a decent amount of people's weird lives they live,
And I had
you
the
know?
weirdest time. What made you go
Yes.
into emergency medicine?
Um, to be honest, I was teaching yoga and I met a girl and she was like, "Oh, I'm an EMT." I was like, "What's that like?" She started talking about it. I was like, "That sounds fun." And I went to EMT school. Like at least she signed up the next day. That's kind of how I do. I kind of like dive into things. And then I liked that, so I went to paramedic school and then eventually nursing school. But it's just EMS, like emergency, it's just my people. It's exciting. I like things like that. It's exciting.
See,
And every game is an away game. Everything's a puzzle that you're trying to piece together.
everyone has like their role, it seems to, in the medical. Like, I remember the nurses actually, some nurses were not nice, but some of the nurses that we had after my brother's accident were like some of the best, most helpful people to have
Hmm.
around. Like the doctors, for the most part, were always very cold and like just we didn't really like them.
Hmm.
And then, of course, like we had many nurses, so there were good ones and not so good ones. But the ones who were good were like angels. And the nurses were the
Hmm.
ones that were like, it's okay to have hope. Like, we've
Hmm.
seen a lot of
Yes.
crazy things. And like
Yeah.
they would give hope and they would be loving
Oh my
and
gosh. Yeah.
I think I used to like be angry at the doctors for not being that way, but now I'm more like that's not like their role that they're in, you know?
Yeah. They're keeping the organism alive. They're the mechanic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. And this, that I remember with hospice nurses, because we were fortunate enough to have a really good home hospice experience with my mom. And I mean, they it takes a special kind of person to be a hospice nurse. Um, and I remember one of them saying like, because strange things happen when someone's like in the active dying process, and I remember one of them saying like, oh, when they're looking up and like, because they do a thing where they kind of like look up and scan sometimes, and they're like they're seeing their loved ones coming for them, things like that, which is kind of a bold thing to say for a nurse, because you're normally forced into this medicalized box. And some of them were very much like that, and some of them were just like they would do what they needed to do, take her heart rate and her blood pressure, and then they would just like put their hand on her heart and like hold her hand and just like stay there. And so it's like, yes, um, there's definitely like special people where you're like, this is your calling. I don't know if you know this, but this is your calling.
Yeah.
So, mm,
Yeah. You remember those people. Yeah, there are some
hmm.
really nice nurses. There's also there's a respiratory therapist because my brother had
Oh
like a tube
yes.
put in
Hmm.
his throat, and this guy would come. He was young. He must have been at the time in his like late 20s or something. And I found him like mildly cute, so it was like a good distraction for me because I would have to stay overnight some nights and like be on
Yeah.
this chair next to my brother's bed. And he'd come in and like suction out the tube and whatever. And
Hmm. Yeah.
uh, but he was really nice to me, and he just like was like just sweet and like
Hmm.
asked how. And one night he brought me ice cream cake. He was like, "Do you want ice cream?" And I
Oh.
was like, "What?" And he was like, there's ice cream cake in the break room. Like, do you want some? And I was like,
Oh,
yeah. And he brought me ice cream. Like, you know, those little things, it's
yeah.
like you actually really hold on to them. I think he ended up,
Hmm.
his dream was to be a firefighter in New York City, and I think
Oh,
he ended up
nice.
going to do it. But like those people and those moments, like,
Hmm.
I remember those things.
It's really easy to feel like a number when you're in the medical system. And so what those times when you feel like, oh my God, someone like sees me and my brother as a person and a,
Yeah.
like that, not just like, oh, we have to change the linens in 31. Oh,
Yeah.
like as a room number, as a, a problem to be solved. When there are those people who are like, it's like the nurses and the respiratory therapists, that staff is like the hands. They're the ones who are really there. And yeah, it's so nice to be like, oh, a human who isn't just like, oh, this is my job. Like my
Yeah.
job is to come in here and do that. And like someone who sees your, and I'm sure with a family member too, it's just like, please be good to my brother, please, like take care of them, especially when you leave, like, you're putting a lot of trust, especially in the ICU when your brother can't speak for himself.
Yeah.
And ICU nurses are a grab bag. They're an interesting crowd. So,
That's what we never left once. Like we just would
wow.
not someone was always on schedule and I don't know.
Hmm.
It's still that way. It's just like
Hmm.
uh I don't know.
Hmm.
It was horrible sometimes. Like yeah, there were just some the first rehab he went in particular was just an awful awful place. But like I can still like smell it, like the
Oh, I've been to lots of those places. We go to a lot of 911 calls there.
uh but yeah.
Yeah, you guys were really, it's good when families are able to do that because usually the things that take down people in that situation are infections, pneumonia,
Yeah. Mhm.
sores, things like that. That's what, and when you're there to be like, hey, did we check on this? Hey, are his linens clean? Hey, you know,
People
that's
are
just,
afraid to be annoying and they don't understand. Like, Jordan kind of thinks it's funny, I think, sometimes where I'm like, with any doctor or medical, I'm like extremely overboard. Like, I do not care
mm,
if it's annoying. I'm like, I want to know
you work for
everything.
me.
Yeah, I want to know everything. I want to know exactly what's happening. I want to know what's
Uh-huh.
going to happen. I want to ask all of my questions because I've seen it and I don't like, people are doing their jobs, but they don't care as much as you because they can't. You're the one who
No,
cares. And it's
yeah,
just I like the first rehab they weren't feeding my brother enough. So he was getting fed through like a stomach pump
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
my dad's an engineer and my dad one day was like staring at it and he was like, this thing isn't putting out as much as it says it is. I don't even know how he figured that out. But he
yeah,
was right. And he kept telling them, they were like, oh, you stupid parent. You're just like, being
yeah,
overly whatever. And he was right. They looked at it and they had been underfeeding him at like the time he needed food the most. And that all got
yeah.
like brushed under the rug somehow. I'm like, shouldn't we have sued?
Well, it's people get really jaded in healthcare because there are so many people saying crazy, untrue shit to them all the time. Like that people are a lot of people are saying things that are nuts to you. So I think
Totally.
people get really burnt out and that's why they dismiss people, which is really sad. There's like, this is so sad. We do training. It's called alarm fatigue because so many nurses will just like turn off alarms just because they're annoying when
Oh,
really
yeah.
the person like needs the help. And usually it's like, it's alarming because something, the
Right.
electrode is misplaced. So there's like trainings that are like, please don't just silence alarms without looking at it. Like it's, I probably shouldn't out the healthcare system like that, but it is funny to be like, yeah, that's a real thing. And, it's, yeah, that's a real thing through all of healthcare. I try to stay out of the jaded group. There's a lot of really like, we call them salty people, like cynical healthcare people, because it does wear on you quite a bit when you see mostly it's people who just like aren't willing to help themselves.
Yeah.
That's tough. But um the ICU is just very, and those types of acute care centers are just usually really hard to see people like that. So you do have to, I've never worked in one, but you do have to probably dissociate a little bit and be like, I can't be everything to everyone.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think that I don't even think it can always be prevented because like I said, like someone's not going to even care as much as you. Like they're doing their job, but they're not like
Hmm.
the person that it's their loved one or their.
Hmm.
And so I just think, yeah, I think people are hesitant to speak up
Hmm.
and to even my dad will still with doctors, and I don't know why, because I'm like, he's been through it, but he will not like super advocate. I'm like, did you ask this? And did you ask that? And did you ask? And he's like, oh no, I don't know. Like, this is just what the doctor said. And I'm like, no, you can't trust them.
Yeah.
You have to
Well,
ask.
they're just people. They're just
Yeah.
people. And, you know, most of our friend group and people we know in the last few years are doctors because my husband's a doctor and we was a resident and he's a fellow now. And they are just people.
Yeah.
And having like personal relationships with them, like you can also ask a question and to five doctors and get five answers. So, not saying that you should go look for like confirmation bias or look for someone to tell you what you want to hear, but uh, just being aware that, yeah, you can ask those questions. They might seem annoyed, but like, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Who gives a shit? You know, like the sometimes things are more nuanced and sometimes things are simpler. So it just depends on the question and the scenario.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, uh, let's wrap up.
Mhm.
But I'd love to ask you if you would want to share, maybe to finish on like a happy note. Uh, well, maybe not as happy, but like a
Yeah.
positive note. What you miss about your mom or what you love. Like, tell us good things
Oh
about your
yeah.
mom.
Um, she was one of those people who was really funny without trying. Um, and I was thinking I get random memories back every so often. This is like so funny to me. So I was listening to the Beatles. She loved the Beatles. And back when it was like their 40th anniversary of being on the Ed Sullivan show, there was this radio station giving out like all the Beatles CDs. It was CDs at the time. And so she's calling every day into this radio station, calling, calling, calling. And she won. And she's like, woo! She's like screaming. She's so excited. And the radio station like used that sound bit forever as like one of those excited people's things. And just like she was so excited. She was the one where you like walk into the kitchen, she's in her apron, like dancing and singing to the Beatles.
Oh,
And just she just was like very quirky. Like looking back, we have so many similarities, but she just like she was a very strong, grounded person. A lot of times, even when I'm feeling sorry for myself, I think that my mom would just be like, buck up, live your life. Like, just stop wallowing. I do think she would probably say that, which I'm like, okay, I know, mom, I know. But she was a really amazing mother and as a nurse stood up for people who nobody else cared about. She stood up for little kids nobody wanted, old people who were being shoved aside by the system. And that's a really unique quality, I think, in a person. Um, so, I mean, there's so many memories I could go into, but I mean, she was an amazing mom and she had even a mystical side to her as well. She would have dreams that she'd be like, I think that I had a dream that this would happen. And that would always surprise me a little. Um, but she just, yeah, she was a really amazing person. Her name was Linda. Yeah. So I hope that everybody gives their mom a big hug or calls their mom on Mother's Day and, gets to know them in many stages of life, you know, as they grow old. I hope that for everybody, and I hope that for me and my son. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you were asking, but it's something it was a little tidbit I've been thinking about recently.
Yeah. I think what's beautiful is that we carry parts of people on with us.
Hmm.
Like, I just think not only just her memories, but like she's part of you and you are still
Hmm.
living. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you can feel it from different like things you say or expressions or whatever. Like
Oh
she
gosh,
also just
yeah.
lives in you and like that's beautiful.
Hmm. And when you know someone and love someone for a very long time, just little things, you're like, oh, that's my mom. Or even, I forget to pay a parking ticket and then I'm calling in and I hear a song she likes and I'm like, ugh, that's her telling me like you should have fucking paid this ticket, you know? Like even, just and I think that's something I've noticed in the healing is when you can look back and not just be like, oh, these were the wonderful, glorious things, but like, these were the funny, quirky, annoying things she did too. You can look back and also think of those and be like, ah, that was funny, or that was just the way she was. And so,
Yeah,
mhm.
like you see the whole person eventually. I was saying that to
Yeah,
Jordan the other day. I was
absolutely.
saying, like, sometimes my brother drove me absolutely insane. He was the most annoying person ever in the world. I wish he
Yeah.
would be annoying again like that, you know? But it's like
Hmm.
that you think about all of their wonderful qualities, and then you're like, yeah, and they're like human
Uh-huh.
qualities.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
the very human qualities. Yes. Hmm.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming back again and sharing
Of
more with us.
course. I know I probably seem like a different person because I'm like very jokey in the first episode, and then this one I'm like taking it down a notch.
No,
But still,
we all have many
yeah,
sides.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Thank you for having me.